Start everything with the name of Allah Almighty, who is the most gracious, the most merciful. Today we are gonna do IELTS reading test, and our test is test number 13 and reading passage number 3. So our questions are: we will have to fill the blanks. We have fill in the blanks from 34 to 39. So the topic of the method is method of determining where the ancestors of turtles and tortoises come from. Step number 1. In step number 1, 71 species of living turtles and tortoises were examined, and a total of dash were taken from the bones of their forelimbs. So we will have to read the paragraph where 71 species of living turtles and tortoises were examined and were written in that paragraph. So for that blank we will have to read the paragraph where it is written as: Walter Joyce and Jacques Goether at Yale University obtained 3 measurements in these particular bones of 71 species of living turtles and tortoises. So our blank first number 1 is 3 measurements. 3 measurements in these particular bones of 71 species of living turtles and tortoises. So in the first blank we will have to write 3 measurements. We shouldn't use this blank. Instead of this we will have to write 3 measurements in the IELTS reading answer sheet, so that we could not waste our time. 3 measurements. Our next one is the data was recorded on a dash necessary for comparing the information. The data was recorded on a dash. So we will read from where we skipped. They used a kind of triangular graph paper to plot the 3 measurements against one another. All the land tortoise species formed a tight cluster of points in the upper part of the triangle. All the water turtles clustered in the lower part of the triangular graph. Triangular graph, yes, the word graph may be the answer. There was no overlap except when they added some species that spent time both in water and on land. Sure enough, these amphibious species show up on the triangular graph. Approximately halfway between the. So we find our answer. Our answer is graph, because it is written that the species were shown up on the triangular graph. So in the second blank we will have to write graph. Graph is the right answer of second blank. Actually this is question number 34 and this is 35. So we will have to write graph in the 35's answer, and in 34's answer we should write 3 measurements. Our next question is: land tortoises were represented by a dense dash of points towards the top. So we will again read the paragraph. Land tortoises were represented by a dense dash. They use a kind of triangular graph paper to plot the 3 measurements against one another. All the land tortoises species from a tight cluster. All the land tortoises were species formed a tight cluster of points in the upper part of the triangular. Points towards the top. Towards the top means upper part of the triangular. Formed a tight cluster, represented by a dense cluster. So cluster is the right answer of 36th blank. So we will write cluster in the answer of 36. So our next question is question number 37, and in the 37 it is written the same data was collected from some living dash species and added to the other results. We will again read from where we skipped right now. All the water turtles were clustered in the lower part of the triangular graph. There was no overlap except when they added some species that spend time both in water and on land. Sure, some these amphibious species. Sure, some these amphibious species show up on the triangular graph approximately halfway between the wet cluster of sea turtles and the dry cluster of land tortoises. So we found our answer. Our answer is amphibious species. How? The same data was collected from some living dash species and added to the other results. So the data was collected via graph as we did in the previous blank. Show amphibious species show up on a triangular graph. Shown up on a triangular means it was the data that were collected. So amphibious is the answer of 37th blank. We will again write amphibious in the IELTS reading answer sheet. I'll suggest you not to do your blanks in the question paper because it will waste your time. So for you, only for you I am writing. So our next one is outcome. The points for these species turned out to be positioned about. The points for these species turned out to be positioned about dash up the triangle between the land tortoises and the sea tortoises. We will again read. There was no overlap except when they added some species that spend time both in water and on land. Sure, some these amphibious species show up on the triangular graph approximately halfway between the wet cluster of sea turtles and dry cluster of land tortoises. Yes, halfway between about halfway up the triangle between the land tortoises and the sea tortoises. Land tortoises and sea tortoises, between the land and the sea. So halfway between the wet cluster of sea tortoises and dry cluster of land tortoises. So halfway is the right answer of 38th question. So we will write halfway in the answer sheet. Our last blank is halfway. Bones of P. Quinsteady and P. Telemphanicis were examined in a similar way and the results added. Outcome. The position of the points indicated that both these ancient creatures were dash. Both these ancient creatures were dash. So we will read from where we skipped. The bones of P. and P. This one leave us in no doubt. Their points on the graph are right in the thick of dry cluster and both these fossils mean the position of the points indicated both these ancient creatures. Fossils means ancient creatures were dry land tortoises. So we also found were dry land tortoises. Again we will check out this one. The position of the points indicated that both these ancient creatures were dash. So both these fossils were dry land tortoises. They come from the era before our turtles returned to the water. So yes, dry land tortoises is the right answer of 39th question. I hope this will be beneficial for you. Do not only subscribe the channel but also like and share the video. Keep supporting the channel. Allah Hafiz.